Welcome to the Murphy, Sam, and Jodi After the Show podcast, which is brought to you by Omaha Steaks. And there's a Father's Day special that you can take advantage of. If you order now, it'll be there in time for Dad's Day. And when you hang around for the end of the podcast, we've got a code for you that'll save you some money. On today's show, Jodi, you were talking about pet peeves on airlines.
Planes.
I guess the top 5.
Peeves on planes.
And the top one is kids kicking seats or something like that.
Yeah, if a kid is kicking the seat behind you.
Yeah. And I think
you don't want to say anything, but you don't want to be kicked the whole time.
Yeah. And so somewhere in that conversation was the, do you talk to your seatmate or do you not talk to your seatmate, right?
Yeah.
And so the thought that I had on that is if you have, if you've flown enough, actually, even if you haven't flown a lot, I think you'll know right off the bat whether a seatmate is going to be somebody that you will want to talk to or not or whatever. I always greet the seatmate just because, I don't know, I think it's the polite thing to do. I'm not going to not do that. But then you know immediately if it's going to be somebody who's going to, and that's okay because I'm not necessarily looking for a conversation, but this is what this is about, for me. When one comes along, to me, it's an opportunity that you won't necessarily get anywhere
Ever
else
again.
because you exist only in your own circle, only in your own box every day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so when you do have a chance to have a conversation with somebody that you connect with, it's something special and it's something that is memorable.
It's always memorable. It's so funny that you say this, Murphy. The real true etiquette of it is probably this. You speak to them because, hey, you acknowledge the fact that we're going to be taking a flight together. We're going to be sitting, sharing the same space. So you say hello, you get settled, and then you stop. You let it be.
Then you put your earbuds in.
And then if it goes further, it goes further. But at least you've acknowledged that you're sharing a seat. And whether a conversation happens or not, well, you can decide about that.
Yeah, right. It doesn't, and if it doesn't, that's fine too. Look, there are plenty of flights I've been on where I've been so exhausted that I need to close my eyes, or I have to use that hour to prepare for whatever work that I'm going to be doing when I land. So it depends. So for me, this is just about sharing that when the opportunity presents itself and it's a surprise to you, it can be pretty special. And that was exactly what happened on the last flight that I was on a couple of months ago, and my seatmate, she works for Kenvue, which was a spinoff of Johnson & Johnson.
Oh.
Johnson & Johnson spun off this, so I if I understand it correctly, this is how I learned it from the conversation with her, is that Kenvue now runs all of the over-the-counter pharmaceuticals part, and I guess Johnson & Johnson, their medical division is strictly the prescription side of things now.
Okay.
And so anyway, it was fascinating conversation to me because she is a rep's the wrong word, but she's a territory manager, and her responsibility is to make sure the proper stock is going to the proper stores.
Oh.
And she interacts, from a customer service standpoint as a liaison to stores or whatever is needed for the company.
Yes.
And then she was just talking about how many millions of things that she's actually managing. It's millions of pieces of inventory, which that's kind of mind-blowing to me because I don't do that. That's not what we're not in the inventory, the store business or whatever retail. So that's kind of foreign to me. So I learned a lot from that, but her background was really cool to know too, that she was born and raised in Chicago. She'd lived in New York City. She's now living in Nashville. She hasn't decided where she wants to stay permanently. I think she mentioned something about Colorado too. But anyway, so she's well traveled. But the other thing that we had in common, and it's funny because it's not one of those things that I talk about because it could freak out the seatmate next to you. As you know, I get queasy, and that's why I take either Dramamine or something like that. And I'm cool for a flight once I do that. It's not a problem. But it gets difficult for me to get into a long conversation with somebody in air because if I'm not facing forward, even with the medicine or whatever, I'll start to feel that not so good feeling.
Oh, really?
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, I can't. I've got to turn my head back. And I actually mentioned that to her at one point when we were about to take off, and she said, just so that you know, as much as I fly, I don't like takeoff, I don't like landing, and I don't like bumps in the air. Oh. And so every single time we would be in a conversation or whatever, she was, just nervous, and I felt for her. And, it was just and she talked about how it can make her queasy too. So we just kind of bonded on
Yeah.
that. But anyway, it wound up being just a pleasant, not pressured conversation. There were moments of silence there if there wasn't anything to talk about. It was really like having a travel companion that you had known, but you really don't because they're a stranger.
Right. It's fleeting. Like you're never going to likely ever see her again.
Yeah.
That's so interesting because the times when I've had someone sitting next to me that was a stranger that we had conversation, it is memorable. I sat next to a pilot one time, and of course, he was willing to talk. I asked 100 questions. I got some crazy answers about short runways and things like that. It was crazy. I also sat next to a woman once who had brought her own snacks, and she was eating this mix that she'd made, popcorn, and she had put pretzels in it and Doritos and things like that. And we started talking about snacks, and man, I never forgot her. The next time I went home and made one of my snack mixes, I thought of her.
Yeah.
I can still see her.
Yeah.
And I just think too, if you're flying together, if you remember the conversation, you also, it's kind of like what you said, Murphy. You probably didn't even realize it. She didn't realize it, but you helped her through that.
Yeah.
She helped you through it.
Yeah.
You pass the time with human connection.
Yeah. And so it's a gift when it presents itself. And so that's why I don't ever block out the opportunity for it, because you never know when you might have that little, little prize to take along with you after, because it does make it special and different. It reminds me of the time that I flew next to the guy who worked for Microsoft in the early days.
Right.
And so he was in retirement, and he lives in Scottsdale, Arizona now, and
I was with you, but you were by him, and you guys talked that whole flight.
Yeah. And he's doing fine, and he's loving life, flying in coach, by the way, you know what I mean? And just but he was that was fascinating to me too. And you're not necessarily going to run into somebody like that every single day of your life.
No.
My big one on the plane, my favorite talking to a person situation was a guy who was a spotter for ESPN. When he got on the plane and sat next to me, I noticed he had his bag and he had a stool, a fold-up stool. And he put it in the overhead thing above us. And I'm thinking, why is a guy carrying a stool on a plane?
Right.
So I asked him.
Nice.
He says, you're going to watch the game this weekend? I said, yeah. And he goes, I'll be in the booth. It's like, I'm looking like, you don't look like Kirk Herbstreit. Who are you? And he's the spotter. He says there weren't enough seats in this booth, so he has a stool that he sits over on the side with the headphones on, and he's communicating with the announcers on ESPN.
Nice.
Wow.
I was like, oh, wow, cool.
That is cool.
He's the spotter for what happened in a play when
What's
they
going
can't.
on in the play, yeah.
Okay.
So like when they're, giving you the color and all that, he's like, it was 34, it was a 4-yard gain, that's still 6 yards, still first down.
All the information. That's how that's how they have so much information seemingly instantaneously, because they're not doing it alone.
Yeah, they don't know it all. They got somebody talking in their ears telling them stuff.
Yeah.
So the lesson in that is, if you want to become a spotter, you got to bring your own stool.
And you'll never forget that conversation.
Right.
And it's
cool,
over, too.
Yeah.
You probably will never see that person again. So you're right. You don't have to speak to you don't have to talk. It depends. But it is the proper, correct, polite thing to do, to acknowledge, hi, excuse me, hi. You say something in the beginning just to say, hey, we're going to sit together. How are you?
Yeah.
And then see where it goes. I think that probably less than 1% of the time, 1% or less of the time, you get someone that wants to talk when you don't want to talk. And that can be difficult because you have to find ways to shut that off. It's rare, but I mean, Sam, you would be the candidate for that. If you were sitting next to someone who really wanted to talk and who didn't take social cues that you were done, that would be hard for you.
Yeah. I usually put my earbuds in as soon as I wait for whoever to come sit in my row, because you're going to be up and down. But then when it's like, okay, we're set, I'm putting them in. And if they continue talking, I'll pull it out. And like,
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm putting it back in now. But yeah.
Well, lovely.
Missed any part of the show? Get it all on the Murphy, Sam, and Jodi podcast.